Say, Baba.
Just wanted to welcome everyone to our remembrance of Bal Natu celebration. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen, who would start us off.
Say, Baba. Wonderful to be here and to share remembrances of Bal Natu. I'm going to start with a brief biography of Bal's life. His name was actually Chintamani Vishnu. He was born on January 24th, 1919, in British India to a Hindu family. He passed on October 7th, 2003 at Meherazad. Bal first saw Baba in 1933 when Baba entered the same railway compartment that Bal, at 14 years old, was in with his family. Bal was deeply moved by Baba, but didn't know who he was. It wasn't until later that he learned who Baba was. As a teenager, Bal had pulmonary tuberculosis. Then his father passed away. He spent a lot of time reading about spiritual masters, but he was particularly interested in finding a living master who was truth realized, someone in the body. Baba next set eyes on Baba on the Nagpur railway platform before a darshan program. By this time, he had found out who Meher Baba was. It was 1944, and he was also going to attend that darshan. Just going to share some. Bal spent a lot of time with Baba, visiting, going at Meherazad, Mehrabad, on travels, Guru Prasad. So I'm just going to point out some things that I found quite interesting. In 1947, Bal was able to meet Meher Baba in Madras. When he arrived, he was invited to stay under the same roof as Meher Baba. On the first day of darshan, Bal met Minu Karas and Meherji. Minu told Bal, when you're in Meher Baba's company, concentrate exclusively on him. He suggested Bal write impressions of the visit and meetings with Meher Baba in diary form. That actually lives on today because that's exactly what Bal ended up doing. And that's what Baba asked Bal to be, a note taker and to keep a diary. For Bal, the second day of that meeting was especially precious. In the morning, Baba gestured, you will have liberation, mukti. On April 5th, Bal left and he got to travel with Baba on the same train. Bal was a school teacher and he had carte blanche to visit Baba as long as he gave 2 days advance notice. So whenever he had vacations from school or would ask for leave, he would visit. On September 4th, 1949, Bal attended the New Life meeting at Meherabad. He wrote yes and wanted to accompany as a companion on the New Life. So he left his job and his family to join the New Life. But because of his frailty and because of his health, Baba had his doctors examine Bal, and they decided that, excuse me, he was much too frail. So Baba released Bal from his oath. He had Abdullah, who was one of the New Life companions and was also an attorney, write something to the effect that Bal would remain with Baba in his new life to the very end. But he sent him back home and gave Bal other orders instead. So 4 days later, Bal returned back asking for his job and returning to his family. Another special visit Bal writes about was in 1953 when they were on a rowboat together. Bal sat next to Meher Baba. Bal wrote, it was the first time in my life I sat so close to Baba, and that feeling is indescribable. And the one thought Bal said he had every time when parting with Baba was, when shall I be in his company again? On September 29th and 30th, 1954, Bal attended the men's meeting where Baba gave the final declaration. There were 900 Indian Baba lovers who attended, men. Baba asked Bal to translate the final declaration into Marathi. And after that, Bal ended up translating many more of Baba's words and messages into Marathi. Baba also had Bal attend to Baba's Marathi correspondence. Of his April 23rd, 1955 meeting with Meher Baba, Bal said, "Matchless are these Meher moments." In 1957, at that time, Baba was staying at Guru Prasad, and he asked Bal Natu and Digambar to come to Guru Prasad and take notes. So again, Bal acted as note taker. Starting in 1959 through 1968, Bal was permitted to stay with Baba under the same roof throughout his summer vacations of 6 weeks. When the summer holidays ended, he would oftentimes go on the weekends to be at Guru Prasad. Bal really enjoyed the intimacy of Guru Prasad days. In 1960, Bal was also invited for a 10-day stay at the end of January at Meherazad. Bal's birthday, January 24th, interestingly, also Francis Brabazon's birthday. That year, Bal decided to rededicate his life to Baba. As a gift, Baba gave Bal a copy of the Master's Prayer. Due to Baba's poor health, many of the summers were quiet times. In later years, Baba spent time in seclusion at Guru Prasad. Again, Bal was there for the entire stay of his vacation. While the summer of 1962 was a quiet summer, Baba indicated he would return in November, and that in turn became the East-West Gathering. In 1965, large gatherings were held at Guru Prasad and also at the Pune Baba Center. In 1964, the previous year, Baba went to inaugurate the Pune Baba Center. And of course, Bal Natu was there for all of these events and occasions. In 1968, Baba was in strict seclusion. Bal also visited in November, on November 3rd, which was the very last time he saw Baba. At that time, Baba invited him more than once to attend Dara and Amrit's wedding. But Bal didn't want to use his vacation time. He wanted to come at Christmas, and he wanted to spend vacation time for the April Darshan in 1969. On January 23rd, 1969, Bal received a birthday greeting from Baba. On January 24th, Bal sent money for tea and sweets for Baba and those at Meherazad. When the women Mandali were going through some of their precious mementos from days with Baba, they came across a garland. This garland was special because it was the very last garland they ever put on Baba when he was in his physical form. And this again was on January 24th, Bal's birthday. There was a small note with the garland that gave its history. On the 24th, Baba had remarked, "It is Bal's birthday today. Garland me for the occasion." It was only years later Bal learned of this and was immeasurably touched that Baba remembered him, and remembering him had accepted for the last time a garland. Bal went to Meherazad when Baba was lying in the crypt. Alaba told him that Baba remembered you on January 31st. Earlier, Bal had prepared a board to write the befitting a fortunate slave message. Bal had one of his students who had a very good handwriting write out the couplets. Bal had Alaba write the Persian words above the couplets. Alaba said on the night of the 30th, Baba had that paper brought to him. On the 31st, he had it placed in Mandali Hall. When Bal heard Alaba tell the story, he thought, what love, what compassion, what unconditional love. Bal attended the 1969 Darshan. In 1975, he became a trustee of the Meher Baba Trust. In 1977, he retired from teaching and came to live at Meherazad. Bal would say, I am a friend to many, but intimate with only one. Bal quietly touched the lives of multitudes of Baba lovers around the world, not only through personal contact, but through the volumes he wrote about Baba. Bal wrote Glimpses of the God-Man, Volume 1 through 6, Conversations with the Awakener series, The Samadhi Star of Infinity. He compiled 4 books of Baba stories, Intimate Times with Meher Baba, Glimpses of the God-Man of Guru Prasad, and countless others. Bal's only thought was to serve Baba, remember Baba's name, and as Baba instructed him in 1947, when he told Bal he would have liberation, he told Bal to let Baba's love, his love, flow on ceaselessly, like a stream down the mountain on its way to the ocean. I visited India with my family in 2002. At that time, 2 of the loveliest young women, Erica and Amber, were caring for Bal Natu at Meherazad. That year, Bal gave a special New Year's card where he wrote about the amazing secret of time being spent in Meher Baba's Samadhi. He had copies for each person staying at the MPR, and I believe they were also sent to Baba centers. I have extra copies if anyone would like me to send them. You can contact me. But I still remember clearly Erica and Amber coming to the MPR to distribute these New Year's cards from Bal Natu. Now I'm going to turn over to people's remembrances, but starting with Erica and with Amber. Jai Meher Baba. Jai Baba to Bal.
Hey, Baba Erica.
Hey, Baba.
Baba.
Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. That was a wonderful summary of Bal's life. And I don't know, Amber, I'm happy to start a little bit, and we may go back and forth a little with each other.
There's some really heavy hitters here. I don't know.
I'm noticing a lot of Bal team folks on the Zoom.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful to see Steve Klein and Mark Keller, and I think I see Fair in there, and Judy Robertson, Dr. Ann. So many of you had wonderful connections with Bal and spent a lot of time with him and were part of that sort of Bal team, as we used to say. So we'll kick it off, but we really do, want this to be everyone sharing, because so many people have wonderful stories of Bal. But it does feel really sweet to be together today and to celebrate Bal. Bal used to say, especially in the end, like, my true friends, when I pass away, my true friends will celebrate me and not cry or be sad or upset, so we'll see if we can get through it without any tears. But it is wonderful to be all together and really celebrate Bal, and of course his sweet relationship with Baba. I think one of the things that I remember is really that in that time of working with Bal, it didn't really feel like working or that we were really helping. It really did feel like Bal was helping us and was so sweet in his care for us as we worked with him. And he would often remind us to take it as a game, that it wasn't work, but it was a game with Baba. And it really did feel like that with Bal. I mean, he was his ability to see Baba's hand and Baba's presence in every little thing, like his watch beeping at the most, opportune moment. As many of you know, Bal used to love this Baba CCCs, or the coincidences. And so he really did, note that in all these moments throughout the day, which was a really wonderful sort of energy and environment to be in. And there's one story that I was remembering just in terms of like making it a game. I remember one time Bal had gotten a letter. He used to subscribe to Reader's Digest, and he had gotten a letter from Reader's Digest saying that he was a semi-finalist to win $1 million. And so even these things that would happen in the sort of day-to-day with Bal that weren't directly related to Baba became related to Baba, and this sort of game of remembering Baba. And I think, and maybe Amber, you remember, I think we spent a week writing and revising a response to Reader's Digest to this letter about him being a semifinalist. And I think Bal knew that everyone probably received this letter, that he, wasn't necessarily a semifinalist, but for him, it was such a wonderful opportunity to make it a game, and to also think about these various paths and connections to Baba in that day-to-day, much in the way that he, wrote conversations and had these conversations. I really think that was his meditation with Baba. So he wrote this letter. I tried to find it, and I couldn't find the reply, and maybe Amber will remember more, but in the letter, he basically said, if he won the $1 million, he didn't want them to roll out, the red carpet, but instead just a line of gunny sacks, because he was really a villager at heart. And he said that $1 million, he would clearly give it all away, right? So he would give it to people who really needed it, and maybe buy one garland to offer to Baba and prasad to give away to his lovers. But I remember him also explaining to the Reader's Digest staff that the true wealth is sort of giving and losing your all in Baba, or in the highest of the high. And it was such a wonderful, I think that's just an example of the ways in which this sort of game of, really what are the different ways that we can find these moments in our lives in the day-to-day to really remember Baba and to connect and sort of have that game with him.
Aww. I had forgotten that. I was going to tell a story that's really Mark Keller's story. So I see that Mark is here. Mark, will you tell the story of Bal saying something like how Bal would always be remembering Baba, and someone said, well, what about all your physical ailments? You're always suffering. And he said, what does that have to do with Baba? He was like, that's my karma. So I feel like he always said that he was like a child or a grandchild to God and to Meher Baba, and that he could ask him anything. And if you can't ask God for something, like who can you ask? Take him as your closest relative, and that. But I don't feel like he ever asked him for help. Like he was always sort of suffering, but he would spend most of the day talking about how Baba was taking care of him. So he was really like, in terms of Western life, he was like, keep on the sunny side, always on. And he really helped me to have an attitude of gratitude, which is actually a 12-step thing too. And I have actually no idea what more to say. I'm just sort of like crying, seeing Anne and feeling Meherazad flowing through the Zoom. So I don't know if you had something else, Erica, you wanted to share. or anyone else?
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have other people jump in, and we'll keep sharing too. I don't know if other folks want to share. I see Dr. Ann.
That'd be great. Dr. Ann, or if anybody would like to raise their hand digitally, it's in the chat how you can do that. And I do see somebody who has an iPhone as their identifier who wants to speak. So I unmuted.
Hi. No, this is Patty Curtis.
Patty.
And I'm actually in a trailer camping, and so I was able to get on, and I did not want to miss this. So it's fun to see Erica. It's fun to see the women that when I was going to Meherazad in the later years and was working with those women with Bal, there was so much tenderness. He was aging. It was towards the end of the life. The gift of what I think they're saying and what I feel so intensely is it was the gift of being able to be in Baba's presence, being able to be through Bal, even in what we considered service, or maybe service, I don't know. It was just a gift to be able to be with him, to have the constant sweetness of exchange that happened in those intimate moments at Meherazad were really indescribable. They're this personal relationship that you knew this Bal had with Baba through all the conversations that he shared with us through his writings, through all what seemed like, okay, I'm going to Meherazad to quote work with somebody, the disciples. But it was not work, what they're saying. It was joyous. I mean, I was sweating sometimes. It was intense. I was trying to remember everything, trying to be good, quote, quote, for Baba's Bal Natu, who he loved and who he cherished. And so I'm glad you're doing this. There could not have been a more gentler, sweeter soul that I remember in the Mandali. Bal Natu had to be right up at the top of that list. And he did not complain, even though I'd ask him what was going on or what we were dealing with and what we'd work with. He directed it so gently that just, you know, this and that, and then we'd go on. But it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And this is such a sweet reminder. I'm so grateful that this is happening, and I just had to pipe in quickly. So Jai Baba to all of you, and Jai Baba to quite a wonderful soul that graced us all. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, if I can speak, because it's late for me, I might not stay till the end. It's just so wonderful to see so many of the people who were around Bal, and a few memories I would like to share is when I was, you know, a long time ago, 30 some years ago, I spent 1 year living at Meherazad, so I was quite new, and a patient like Bal was quite sort of overwhelming at times, but he was so wonderful. He was taking care of me. You know, he always had a little present for me when he needed a consultation. He would have a quote or a picture of Baba or a flower. You know, he would have picked a flower in the garden to give me. And it was really, it was so helpful. He was so helpful in so many ways because he noticed everything. I remember one time one of the servants had been bitten by a swarm of bees. So I'm taking care of him. It's in the evening. He's on a drip in the dispensary, and Katie sent a message that it's dinner time and she needs to close the kitchen, and what am I doing? And so what to do? There is, you know, it's evening, there is no staff except me, and I don't feel right leaving that guy who is recovering but not okay. And Katie, you know, Katie was somebody you didn't want to upset. And who shows up? Bal Natu, saying, I think it's time for your dinner. You should go to the other side. I will sit and be with the patient. I mean, these things like that will blow me away. You know, he had noticed that there was something and I was still busy in the dispensary. He didn't mind sitting with the guy who is working in the garden. I was not at all below him. And that, I think that's quite typical of Bal. And another thing is the end of his life, you know, the last year or so when he was having so many difficulties. And Baba sent all this team, you know, all these young people arrived and spent, I don't know, a year, 2 years, how long you spent, Erica, Amber, there were other people, there was Nick, I don't remember everybody, but there was this team totally dedicated to Bal, not just helping him with the books, but helping for his special diet and for so many things. And after Bal Natu, after Bal went to Baba, you all disappeared. I mean, you didn't stay in Meherazad or Meherazad. Obviously, your assignment was for him. And I always felt that was so much Baba's touch, you know, that Bal was sort of one of his kind. He was in Meherazad surrounded by Zoroastrians, you know, like he was the one who would be on the veranda and everybody who spoke English would be in Mandali Hall listening to Eruch. And Bal would notice that this one and this one are not in the Mandali Hall because they don't understand English. And he would invite them and speak to them in the archive room in Marathi or in Hindi. He was, he was really truly some great example of how to love Baba. So thank you for this opportunity to remember him.
Thank you, Dr. Ann. Go ahead, Jeff.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
I had a lot of wonderful times with Bal Natu. He was so sweet. And I mean, you could hug him almost with he was so thin that you could take I could almost put my hands completely around his chest. I mean, it was unbelievable. But you probably all remember, he was working on these glimpses of the God-man, one after another. And I happened to be there when he got very sick and he couldn't go into the trust to continue the research on the book. So he would be just lying there in the archive room and unable to go on with the research and do the books. So he started writing on pieces of paper. He would write stuff down and stories and things like that. And he would give them to me and I'd go back to Meherazad and try to kind of piece them all together and everything. And those became the conversations with Baba. And so he continued his writing, but it was right from his bed that he'd do. And he'd be scrawling around and he'd have all sorts of different pieces of paper. And I try to kind of put some continuity to it until he finally kind of got the hang of how he wanted to, do these books that were so wonderful. And I remember Amber and I were working on one book in which he would write as if this was him meeting Baba. But this particular guy was overpowered by lust, greed, and anger, and a very kind of unsavory character. And Amber and I look at each other and say, "Bal, do you know anything about a character like this?" But obviously he just didn't have problems with those things. But he was writing as if he, was some kind of low life, trying to, be there with Baba. But it was kind of funny because it was so out of character with the kind of true kind of purity of character that he had. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of Bal Natu.
Thank you, Jeff. Jai Baba. Judy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
I'm also touched to be here with the Bal team that I was fortunate to be a part of for a number of years, really almost all my years at Meherazad. And I have such fondness for that period, and obviously, as all of us gathered today, for Bal. As has been mentioned, is utter sweetness. And Anne mentioned him noticing things. And what I noticed, among many other things, was how Bal would not only take folks that didn't speak English, but he would see some of the Western pilgrims sitting alone on the veranda, or maybe on a bench outside, away from the group. And he would just quietly walk over and sit down near them and start chatting, really informally, really sweetly, no big deal. But he would befriend every single person that ever set foot on the veranda of Meherazad, and make them feel as if they were a person, which is true, personally invited by Mayor Baba to be there. Maybe they didn't fit in with the crowds that were easy and had been around to get, but Bal would find them, and he would, he'd just be Bal with them, which was this sweetness, this totally unassuming presence. And it was such a gift to all of us, including myself when I first arrived. But I saw him year after year after year doing that with each new and not quite fitting into the crowd pilgrim who had brought their heart to Baba. And I think that also one of the things about Bal, I had the good fortune of working on several of the books over the years with Bal, and he was the most collaborative author I've ever met. He would bring in so many different individuals. A pilgrim would walk into what they called the records room, which was effectively in those years his office, and he'd have something read out to the person and ask for their comments or their additions, and that would become part of that book or part of that particular story. He was so beautifully and lovingly collaborative with all of us who had different abilities or not, and include us in the process, which, as was mentioned earlier, it's not so much that we were there to help him, but he was really truly helping all of us in so many different ways. And I guess perhaps I wasn't a good friend of Bal's, because I'm remembering that in October of '03, I had a gift for Bal in my suitcase, and I stopped. Dr. Ann had invited me to rendezvous with her in France, and we could head back to India together from there. And in those days, people didn't have individual laptops, etc. Or I guess they did, but there wasn't access to the internet generally in Uray, where her folks were living. So we went to the post office, and I was reading over her shoulder from the one computer that you could actually use in Uray, that Bal had passed. And I remember that it was pouring rain outside. And I read that, and I just walked out the door, and the tears were pouring down my cheeks. I couldn't tell the tears from the raindrops, that he had passed. But it's really only, there's this, his presence, it's a celebration, his joy. He united at that time with Baba. I think it was later, maybe than 47, that Baba told him directly that this would be his last life. And actually, when we were arriving we had a vehicle from the airport, and we're getting close to Meherazad, and we stopped along the roadside and purchased garlands for Bal, and one for Erich, and of course, a really big one for Mayor Baba. And I commented in the car, this is just like Bal. He's like, so he didn't exist. Only Meher Baba existed for Bal. There's no place to place a garland for Bal Natu except at Baba's feet on his samadhi. Because, Bal, Erica and Amber and others were able to disperse his remains in the confluence of sacred rivers. And it would be just like Bal to make himself invisible, so there's not even a place. At least with Erich, there was this physical tomb you could offer a garland to. But that disappearing act of Bal's was so typical of him. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Judy, thank you. That was beautiful. Meherazad? Meherazad, are you going to speak? Jai Baba. Well, you may have disconnected. I can't be sure. Is there anybody else that would like to say something? I see a hand. All right. Lisagreenstein.
Somebody's got. Actually, it's Ron Greenstein. Lisa is over there, though. I wanted to tell an anecdote, but first I'll just say that I did have the opportunity to sit in Bal's room with him at Meherazad for one time with a group of people, and of course, and I would see him around in Mondeley Hall here and there, and of course he's a very charming person, but for me, Bal Natu was a tremendous source of literature for Baba, so many different kinds, and such a wealth, and his editing of people's stories into volumes that just were uplifting. So that for me is how I connect with Bal mostly. But I wanted to tell this one story, which starts out in 1991, going to Myrtle Beach with my wife and my son and daughter, and they were little kids at that point, I think. Well, not that little, maybe 10 or 8 or something like that. But I went to we went over to Sherry, our books, and they were really excited there because they had just gotten a shipment of a new publication, which was this book here, Conversations with the Awakener. And they were unpacking them. And I thought, oh, I would love that. I would love to have that. I probably had read some of Glimpses before, and I want to get a copy of that. So I bought it, and this is the copy right here. Took it back to our cabin, read it for the few days that we still had left on the center, and then we got in a car to drive back to Atlanta, Georgia, where we were going to be attending an affair at with my brother's family. And so we were driving from Myrtle Beach to Atlanta, Georgia, and there's a tremendous amount of farmland. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot an important aspect of this, because Lisa, this is really more Lisa's story than it is my story. But Lisa was walking on one of the paths at the center, and this one day, this was in October, a leaf fell from a tree, which pretty typical thing, but it fell right on her shoulder. And it was sitting on her shoulder, and she picks it up, and she liked the way it looked, and it just reminded her of Baba, and she took it back to the cabin and put it into this book here, just to keep it for when she returned home. So now we're on our way, going back to Atlanta in this car, a rental car, and it stops. It just kind of like ground to a stop, and we pulled off the side of the road. And that's disappointment. That was one of our disappointing things. But nevertheless, with Baba, you have to kind of check things out. You have to see what's going on here. And so I looked off to the side of the road, and there was a lot of farmland around, but in this particular case, there was an office building that I could see. It was pretty far off the road, but nevertheless, we got out of the car, went to this office building. They had a phone, which there were no cell phones that I could think of at that time. At least we didn't have one. And we called AAA. Somebody came, towed us to a mechanic. They fixed the car. Pretty quick. I mean, great service. I was pleased. So when we get back in the car and start traveling on, the rest of our trip to Atlanta, Lisa sees this book sitting on the dashboard. So she thought, oh, she hadn't looked at it yet. The only thing she had done is she had put that leaf in here. So she has just flipped through it, and of course, it flipped right to where this leaf was. This is the leaf right here. And she thought, well, let's see, what does this say here? Will of God. That was the title. It says, is it true that not a leaf moves without the will of God? Your will, I ardently asked you. The question has been raging in my mind for years. So that's a good use of that book. And Baba put it too. So thanks for doing this. Jai Baba to all.
Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba. Meherazad, you're back. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah. Jai Meherazad, sorry, that time I had some problem with my cell phone.
No problem.
So it so happened, our family knows Bal Natu ji, right from 52 onwards with my uncle. So my uncle used to be late MSR Shastri. He was very close to Bal Natu. And Once Bal Natu told me that about my uncle, because there are certain, when Baba came to 1954 to Machilipatnam visit, Bal Natu also accompanied Baba in that group. And he told about my uncle's characters to about how normally when Baba makes an house visit, the house owner introduces all the family. But exceptionally, Bal Natu told me that your uncle never introduced any family members. Then I was just standing where introduce your family. My uncle told Baba is God, he knows everything, there's no need for introduction. And he also said about my uncle saying Sanskrit slokas and all this thing. And the atmosphere in Meherazad, he told me about Baba opening the center at Machilipatnam at Baba's own picture, Baba bow down. And there's no one else can I bow down except this thing. And Baba bow down to that and to the photo and inaugurated the center. That photo is still in our position. We are going to hand it over to Machilipatnam Center. That. And he also said about Baba how he used to wipe off the egos among the people. And he described the story narrating that if you make from sugarcane, when you make jaggery, the first thing is mud will come and mud will float on that. And he takes off the mud like that, the egos will be taken out of them. And he creates and he destroys the egos of other people like that. And secondly, I had the fortune to work with my Bal Natuji for more than 10 years. He was my chief volunteer for Amar Tithi times. He was the chief volunteer and I used to be this thing. And he always used to come. And I still remember there are best persons to talk about the Bal Natu is, according to my understanding, is there are two persons. I have seen them in the list of today's speakers. I don't know whether they spoke or not. That one is Steve Klein, the other is Mark Keller. They have worked with him and in preparing many books. And it so happened once Baba, while giving the glimpses, when they are making the glimpses of the God-man, he casually asked, did your uncle, I think I remember that your uncle had the copy of the diaries of the Krishan Chand diaries. I said, I'll find out, and brought from my aunt that book and gave it to him. And they're consisting of the complete, and so that's the reason glimpses of Godman, you'll get a lot of Andhra tour, more detailed than any other book, including Lord Meher, you got more in this. And thirdly, Bal Natu has got Bal Natuji got a very humble, very soft, very thin person because of the health problems and all this thing. And one incident he's told me, when I first time saw Baba in 1933, and I just admired him. And second time I contacted with 1943 with Baba, and 44, I went to Baba. I was totally robbed in the station with money. So what I felt at that time is, Baba totally robbed my heart. I'm totally surrendered to Baba from that day itself, because Baba robbed my heart, and he has took me as a one of his trusted person, and that's the reason he was made a Mandali member also. And after his retirement, he joined Mandali. And one more aspect is, I don't want to take much of time, because most of the things about the Bal Natu, you will find it in the either in the books and or his compilation of many books he compiled, out of which I had an opportunity to do printing of the 3 books, that is Constant Companion, The Showers of Grace, and the other one is when he takes over, or I still remember third book, that where Ananta Reddy's story is also narrated in that book. So he's the that book, he wants every literature should be at the minimum cost. So then we took the quotation and we took to the printer how much it cost that book. Those days the foreign books in India is very expensive. So we quoted that book around 13 rupees, and not in a single page we have wasted. The front page, Baba's picture was there, and the next page we got a foreword. Normally foreword will be this, but to save the money and all that, we give it for 13 rupees. We are brought with this thing, and Bal Natu has fixed the rate as 15 rupees for the book. And that way he has, and he used to pay for the books. He never took anything free of cost. He invests money and did this thing, and he was not. He distributed many books to many Baba lovers, especially those who can't afford to purchase Baba's literature, either in Marathi or in English or in some languages. If somebody gives in Telugu, he used to distribute. Like that, Balaji was, people, they call Balaji, but I call Bal Natu. He was very soft and very this thing, and he is a very good storyteller. And his room if you just go, his room was just beyond the Iruch room, third, where we used to go and meet him. He used to show us all the interested things about the Baba's literature, Baba's, and his future plans for the writings and all that. And he used to collect a lot of stories from the pilgrims, and he used to put that way. He used to share the almost all expenses, which most of this thing, it came into the limelight because of the Bal Natu. And I think the best person, I don't know why Steve Klein is not talking about Bal Natu, because Steve Klein and Mark Keller, they are like shadows to Bal Natu. And there's one more girl also today in the list, that Uma from Hyderabad. Her father has a very close associated with, and she can also put some light so that people can understand, share, because Bal Natu was a guiding factor for me and my mother in many issues. And he was very soft, very humble. And because of him, many were advised, especially Maharashtrians, Marathi people, who were taken the advice, and he encouraged people also. The many story writers also he encouraged, many what he called amateur writers. He has helped them, and he has given foreground, and he used to help in giving also some stories to them to print. Like that, he encouraged M.V. Kandale in writing Maza Meher ki Baaton Mein, like that, his thing. And to share his experiences means we have to, we can get most of the terms are printed, which sort of you can read out, but the love and the affection from a tiny and thin person. And I still remember he used to wear 3 shirts and a 1 half sleeve sweater inside and a muffler around his neck. And many people who seen him is this thing, very, very this thing. And he was so guiding factor to many people, and he encouraged also. With that small sharings, I really give loves and regards to Bal Natu ji. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Thank you, Meherazad. And Mark, do you want to speak? Jai Baba.
Am I muted now?
We can hear you now, Mark.
Oh, okay. Yes, the CCC business. In Marathi Deco, Marathi or Hindi, somebody will go, when they see somebody, go, Deco, 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 CCC. And so when Bal would see a magical Baba coincidence, he would go, CCC. He wasn't aware he was doing it. Other people were. And so I was due to arrive at Meherazad, and I knew anytime I left Bal, he would wonder who will now come and help me. And somebody would always show up and be there to help him. And it was just, so one time I was arriving at Meherazad. I'd just come all the way from the States and went to Meherazad to help Bal. And just at that point, Glenn and Laurel Magrini were on the point of leaving. And I think, Laurel, if you're there, I think maybe you had just said goodbye to Bal and gone in to bow down to Baba's chair. Anyway, I came just as Laurel was parting from Bal, and she had been helping Bal during this whole period. And then I went to Bal, I said, CCC, indicating Laurel's leaving, now I'm here. And then Bal realized he was saying CCC all the time. So then anytime there was some Baba coincidence, he'd go CCC. And this became particularly acute during Amartithi times when these things would happen by dozens. And for some reason, he'd always say, CCC, tell Ted Judson. I don't know why, but I'd flag Ted down. He'd be on the motorcycle, Ted, so this just happened. And so I go, oh my God. I mean, Ted was really impressed. So a couple stories. One, yes, about the bit about the karma. Bal would, once he just remarked about taking someone's karma away, that after all, the person had earned that. It was, it was theirs. It worked for it. So who's somebody else to come in? I mean, that's part of that. And so he did not regard his ailment as something Baba should take away or anything like that. That's why he said, what does he have to do with that? This is a different deal. And Bal had an incredibly subtle mind. So the nuances that he would pick up, the little inflections, were just too subtle for me until he had said them, and they've affected me since then. And I think one thing that made me feel I needed to be around Bal, and early on, I don't think Bal really liked me very much for some reason, but I felt like I just sort of had to hang around with him. I think because he was saying that your relationship with Baba is your relationship with Baba. It's nobody else's. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. If you do that, you're actually kind of cheapening their relationship with Baba by making it sound like something that can be replicated by somebody else. So an episode happened that I wrote to Amber and Erica after Bal's passing, but I think it's really indicative of the way Bal thought. During Amartithi, a young man came to see Bal. Mayor Chand will no doubt know who I'm talking about. Well, maybe not, but it's been a long time. And he was on the verge of tears, saying that his sister was unwilling to marry. She'd had some Baba experience and felt that that she should not marry. And everybody had spoken to her that she should get married. And Alaba had said to her, if you don't marry, I will not speak to you, and even Baba will not speak to you. Very fiery. And so Bal said to this young fellow, send her to me, I'll talk to her. And the boy began to cry, and he said, she only cries. The moment somebody brings this up, she bursts into tears, nobody can speak to her. Don't worry, just tell her to come. So the boy went out. And I'm beginning to feel kind of sore about this. It's like, why is everybody getting on this girl? I mean, it's her decision if she wants to marry or not. I'm not all that familiar with Indian customs and, how the whole family structure works, but it's a serious matter. Bal says the brothers cannot marry until she's married. And I'm still, that doesn't make me feel any better. I'm still kind of mad about it. But keeping quiet. And then the girl shows up and she's just overjoyed that Bal has sent for her. So she sits down and they begin to talk, and the situation had been that she had been working in a chemical laboratory, and on that particular day she had worn, I believe, a cotton sari instead of the nylon one she normally wore. And a fire broke out in the lab, and her sari caught fire and very badly burned. And she had cried out to Baba while she was on fire to save her. And she was taken to the hospital, and I think the burns came right up to her chin. And it appeared that she would be so badly scarred that no one would want to marry her anyway. And when there was something about this. Anyway, let's just say she was very, very badly burned. And when the bandages were removed, she had no scars. I mean, looking at her, you see a very faint paleness where the burns had been. So she felt at that point this was such a miracle that Baba had saved her life, and now her life was Baba's. And therefore she should not marry. So Bal talked to her very sweetly and gently about this and what an amazing experience she had, and that how it had brought her to Baba so closely, and you know. And then he said, but you know, by saying to Baba, now Baba, I will not marry, in a way you're laying down a condition on Baba. You're saying, I'm not going to do this, and maybe Baba wants you to. And so at least you should think, Baba, if it's your will, then I will do this, but this is what I would like to do. I would prefer not to marry. And she understood all of that. And then what surprised me actually at that point, and she's taking all of this, is he says, however, if you feel deep in your heart that you should not marry, that this is what Baba wants for you, then don't get married. Whoa. Did the family hear this? Did they know he was going to say that? So he's saying to this girl, your relationship with Baba is yours. You know, don't lay a condition on Baba. Baba is very aware of the importance of this girl getting married to the whole culture and the family. But at the end, he came back and said, this is up to you. And she went away very happily. And actually, I heard a year later that she had gotten married. So that was, I think that story says everything about the way Bal felt about our relationships with Baba. It's you and Baba and nobody else, and don't judge yourself by anybody else. One other little story that Bal told me that I think is really worth sharing. Bal was standing in a line to greet Baba, I believe at Guru Prasad, but it may have been someplace else. But it was not in Andhra or anything. It was in Maharashtra, and probably Guru Prasad. And there were people in the queue ahead of him who had brought expensive gifts from Bombay. So these were the Bombay people, and they had come and they all had beautiful things to give to Baba. And he had brought nothing with him at all. And standing in line and seeing these people ahead of him, the thought got into his mind, and he couldn't get it out, Meher Baba's for the rich. And no matter what he did, he could not drive this thought out of his mind. And as he got a little closer, there was a tulsi plant right next to him. So he broke off a sprig of tulsi to offer to Baba as he reached Baba. Baba saw him approach, and as he approached, Baba prepared himself to receive the gift. I think he even wiped his hands, clean his hands, and when Bal came, Baba bowed and held out his hands and then received this little sprig, and then it handed it to one of the mandali with a look on his face like, take this very carefully someplace, keep it is precious. So that's what I have to contribute.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Sorry for the interruption, Mark. The girl's name is Rani from Hyderabad.
Ah,
She had in a fire in chemical factory. Her name is Gajalakshmi.
yes.
Actually, we call her Rani. She's from Hyderabad. A
Yes.
wonderful story which I've narrated. We go into the deep, everybody will get tears about her story.
Is
Yeah.
there some detail that I missed that
Yeah, of
is-
course, there's a big story that Uma can able to throw light on that, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
And I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't able to recognize because of your baldness and white
Yes.
beard. Jai Meher Baba for a long time no see.
Yes, yes. Jai Baba Merchan. Good to hear
Jai
from
Meher
you.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Uma, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Yeah, Jai Baba.
Hey,
I
Baba.
thought I would escape, but Meherazad remembered. And he caught me.
Can we
Jai
see
Baba. Jai Baba. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but can we see you or no?
Up to you.
2254542. This meeting ID does not exist. Goodbye.
Some disturbance there. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I got it. Go ahead.
Actually, around 67, December 68, we have heard of Baba. We were introduced. My father worked for railways, and some railway people wanted to have a what you call bhajan in our house during the birthday program, birthday celebrations. And that's how my grandmother, daddy's mother, she agreed, she being the eldest of the family, they wanted her concern. And we had the bhajan program at home. And that's how we have just heard of Baba. And some other time I will narrate how we have actually come to Baba after that. We were getting ready. He being in railways, he got the reservation done for April Darshan, 69 Darshan. And when we have heard Baba dropping of the body, then we didn't believe him. And then he got all the tickets that were reserved cancelled. And that's how there was a gap. We could not take Baba's physical darshan. That's about not going to see Baba, not having Baba's physical darshan. After that, I don't know till today how it happened. And my father is no more, but somebody wanted to write his story. So I took a few details from him. In those days, the railways were not, divided into different categories like Western Railway, Eastern Railway, Southern Railway, things like that. And so we belong to the southern part of India. And from there, he got transferred to the place where Bal Natu uncle was working. So he was transferred there, and all the way near Bombay, from Hyderabad to that part of the country, which is unusual maybe. In those days also, not many people got transferred. It's out of the blue, he was transferred there. And that took for a very short time. And somebody has seen Baba's picture on his table under the glass. And then they said, Bal Natu is here, who is from this place, this area, and why don't you consult him? So that's what he got touch in with Bal Natu, and he happened to meet him. And he would go often. He said, he used to tell us that he used to visit him often. And he was the key person to mobilize Daddy to visit Meherazad and Meherazad. So that's how he had been there for the second or third Amar Tithi. If I'm not mistaken, it's the second Amar Tithi. 71, he had been there, and he had a lovely quarter in Kuritwadi, the place where Bal Natu worked as a teacher. And then soon after that, he was moved after seeing the Amar Tithi, and he felt the family is missing. So the very next month, in February, he happened to take all of us there. And then we had a few other places, Pandharpur and other places to visit. And then we had been to Meherabad and Meherazad. After that, I think he had given me a small pic with a pocket, with an envelope sort of a thing for my wedding. And then he was very, very dear to us. And he had a special place for Daddy. Daddy's name is, my father's name is also Bala Krishna. It's Bal uncle's is Bal, but Daddy's is Bala Krishna. That is Krishna's name. Bala is young Krishna or infant Krishna, Bala Krishna Rao. And he would call him Balu, he would call him. And n number of times he would pass by while we were walking to the trust, trust office there in Meherabad, and registration office. And he, as soon as he would see my father, he would get off the car and he would wish him and then he would go. There was never a single day when he would just pass by like that in the car. If he had seen Daddy, he would get off and he would always wish him. And every time we would go to Meherazad, in the afternoon, we would go and sit with him and spend some time with him all alone with the family. He would share some intimate things with Daddy and all of us. He would make us sit on the carpet there and he would talk to us. And like that, he was the key person to initiate Daddy to go to Meherabad and Meherazad. And after the work is done, I think Baba has transferred again Daddy back to our Andhra Pradesh, our own local area. So that was the time he had a very good rapport with Bal uncle, and he would always call him Balu, Balu, where are you? Balu, where are you? And he was very, very intimate with all of us. And that is my little memory that I have about Bal Natu uncle. Jai Baba. Thank you for giving the opportunity. And I was actually hesitating very little to talk about it, but Meherchand initiated, I think. He must be happy now. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Uma. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Well, I'm just going to ask Steve Klein if he'd be willing to share with us.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you fine. Thank you.
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to see so many old friends that I haven't seen for years. Some cases, decades. So that's kind of exciting. Yeah, I've got a couple stories. Actually, a bunch of stories. As people talk, it brings back so many stories. But I want to correct something that Karen said at the very, very beginning in her biography. What she neglected, she talked about how Bal was searching for a personal master, I believe. And she neglected the fact that actually Bal was very much against masters, because Bal was very much in favor of quit India, India's independence. And he felt that all these gurus and masters were distracting people and taking away from the necessity of political struggle. And in fact, Bal used to go around, which is hard to believe given his later health, on a bicycle and give rabble-rousing speeches to whip up people to take political action. And in fact, one place where he gave a speech, he realized later on that that was a field where he gave the speech, later became the site for the Pune Baba Center. And so initially he was very much against all of that. So it wasn't just that he was searching and then he happened to find Baba. Baba really turned his whole frame of reference around. Just a little thing, because you don't really think of Bal as being a rabble rouser, but I like that image of young Bal, whom Eric used to call Lazarus, because Bal was so weak from his illnesses, his tuberculosis. I think he only had part of one lung left for the rest of his life. He was so ill he couldn't even turn over in bed with his own power. People had to turn him. And Eric used to call him Lazarus because Baba had raised him from the dead. And we all thought, well, some of us thought that Baba was going to outlive everybody. And he came pretty close. He outlived a lot of them with his poor health. And in fact, speaking of that, somebody mentioned, maybe Meherazad, that he used to wear multiple shirts. And he also used to wear several pairs of pants. And the reason he did that was that people then wouldn't be so shocked by how skeletal he was. So he would do that on purpose because he didn't want people to worry about that, because, you know, if you've seen him, he must have weighed, what, 80 pounds or something? One time, I remember he was bowing down at Baba's chair in Mandali Hall in Meherazad. And I was standing next to Gohir, and Gohir just said, he's as small as a baby. Because when he crouched down to bow, he really was, he was around the size of a rabbit. But I have to say, yeah, another thing, I mean, people pointed out sort of how sweet Bal was and how self-effacing, which is definitely true. And people have talked about Bal's room and the record room. What a lot of people never knew is that Bal actually had a room. I don't remember now whether it was room number 3 or room number 4, but that was his room. But on a program day, people would come and they'd immediately go into his room and throw all their knapsacks and stuff on his bed and totally clutter the room so he couldn't use it. And nobody ever knew it. And Bal never said a word about that. And you can just imagine if a Westerner had a room and people came in and just used it as a dumping station for all their stuff, how upset they would be. But Bal, of course, never said anything. And Bal never considered himself one of the Mandali. He would always talk about the Mandali, but he would never say that he was one of them. And he was always struck, even awestruck, by the Mandali's love for Baba, not his own. In fact, he used to laugh at himself because he said that people said, you know, how Bal just accepted his illnesses, which I guess is true. But he also complained a lot about them. And he would laugh about himself, about complaining to Baba about his illnesses. Because he said, Baba has shown me in person and in my dreams and in his visions that he's with me all the time and is taking better care of me than I can, but I can't stop my mind from worrying and from calling out to Baba, which I thought was nice for the rest of us who have no control. And Baba would just laugh at himself like, what can I do? This is my nature. But as he said, he would call out to Baba because he said, you know, some people look at Baba as a judge and they worry, oh, if I do something bad, Baba's going to punish me. And he said, if you take Baba to be a judge, then he'll judge you. He said, so I don't even take Baba as my mother and father because they discipline you. That's why I look upon Baba as my grandparents because grandparents let you get away with everything and you can complain and you can do anything and your grandparents will always accept it. And that was his relationship with Baba, of just accepting Baba's unconditional love. And well, there's so many CCCs, we won't get into all the CCCs, which someone pointed out to Bal at one point that, you know, Bal, Coincidences has 3 C's in it, which was in itself a CCC, which Bal liked. Someone mentioned, I guess Judy talked about how collaborative Bal was, which is definitely true. Bal was always open for anyone else's opinions or advice or suggestions. And one thing that amazed me, I don't remember when I started working with Bal on Glimpses, but it was on volume 2. So I don't know, let's say 70, I mean, I don't know when, it was pretty early on. And Bal was already, by our standards, an elderly man. English was his second language. And frankly, his English in those early volumes was not good at all. And it astonished me how much he was able to learn and absorb and change. And he was eager to change. And he would say something, I'd say, Bal, I don't really know quite what you're getting at. Just tell me what it is you want to say. And he would tell me, and I'd say, oh, this doesn't quite say that, or this isn't quite grammatically correct. And then he'd want to know, well, why? And I never knew. I mean, my mother had taught me grammar by just wincing when I did something wrong, but I never knew all the rules. I've never taken a grammar course. I don't know all the different cases and the technical terms. And he loved it when Daphne's father would come, who was a real scholar, because he could explain it. Her father knew Greek and Latin, and he knew how all the grammar worked. And Bal would just listen enraptured because he loved to learn. And I was just astonished at how much he changed and how good his English became, his written English over the years. It really improved. And in all those years, I couldn't master 2 sentences in Marathi. And his English just got better and better till it was quite good at the end. And, but I mean, when all this is, it's true. I don't want to go on too long because I know other people have stories. And it's true that Bal was really sweet. And I've heard a lot of people tell me, you know, I had a really close relationship with Bal because he was the one that came out when I was sitting alone on the veranda, or he was the one who invited me into the record room to talk to me, or he remembered after 3 years that I was wearing the same dress that I had worn 3 years ago, and just how he touched so many in his own sweet, you know, sort of self-effacing way. But he was, he was the, you know, the hand of steel, the fist of steel, and the glove of velvet. That although it's true he was very self-effacing, you could not budge him if he had a certain feeling about what was right. And this extended to his writings as well. And I used to give Bal a really hard time. I mean, unlike Mark and Erica and Fair and Amber and so many others who were really sweet and loving to Bal, I gave him a really hard time. And I would often argue with him about something. And no, Bal, you can't say that. Don't say that, Bal, that's not right. You could not budge. He would be so sweet and gentle, but you could not change him. Although on his own, he might 3 weeks later say, I haven't been able to sleep. I've been thinking about it. And then he would come and say, I think you were actually right about that. Let's change it. But maybe we can maybe we can get Glenn McGreeny to tell a story about doing bookcases for Bal, and how in his own sweet way, Bal could drive you mad because he was so meticulous. And he would see the really tiny details that you would think, oh, it's not worth worrying about. But Bal would worry about them. And he would keep worrying until he thought it was right. And this is what would please Baba. And that would drive, well, some of us, at least me, crazy. But yes, he was very sweet. I know one time when we were there, it was Daphne's birthday. And Bal Natu, of course, had no money. And maybe Amber can tell the story of Bal's venture into capitalism, the time he's become a big businessman. And so chili peppers, maybe she remembers that story. But Bal didn't have a lot of money. And yet when it was Daphne's birthday, Bal gave her a package of glucose D. Maybe some of you remember the glucose D biscuits that were very, very cheap. And this probably cost 2 rupees. But he got her a little box of glucose D, and then he picked some marigolds. And he put the marigolds on and held them on with a rubber band around the box and presented to Daphne as a birthday present. And we were so touched. It was so sweet, so typical of Bal, that he made that gesture. And with almost nothing, he was able to turn it into a really sweet little present for her. So I'll sign off. Other people can talk now. Maybe we can get the McGreenies to come forward. They're hiding.
The McGreenies, where are they? I'm looking. Are you there? Oh, I see them, Laurel and Gwen. Would you be willing to share? Maybe they're having a sandwich. Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, hello, hello.
Can we see you?
I have to figure out how to do that.
All right, well, it's not important. We can hear you.
No, but I look horrible. Anyway, I don't have a specific story, although I'm enjoying everyone's stories, and it really brings back the feeling of dear Bal Natu, or Natuji, as for some reason I always called them. This was my impression of Bal Natu. And Glenn says, forget it. He's not telling the story about the bookcases. That's not going to Anyway, here's my feeling about Bal Natu was, and I loved him. He was so nice, he was so sweet, and absolutely dogged in getting his way, which is nothing wrong with that. But I mean, he would insist that you do something the way you do it. And sometimes I called him the Gnat, G-N-A-T, because he would buzz, 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 buzz until you did it just right. Anyway, but said with love. Bal Natu, there we were, young people living or staying in India for long periods of time, surrounded by Erich, you know, to me, one of the, in my experience, greatest man, human man. And Mani, Mehra, you know, all the greats with these fantastic personalities and their intense love and obedience for Baba. And even the residents had really big personalities. And Bal Natu, he was a man who was anxious, worried, not all the time, but he was a worrier. He was anxious at times. A lot of his qualities I could identify with tremendously, but not as being like the highest ideal type of thing, which you saw in the other mandali. What I'm trying to say, without sounding ridiculous, is that my feeling was, if Baba loves Bal Natu as he is and accepts him as he is, then he loves the rest of us too, as we are, with all our foibles and weaknesses. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for Bal Natu, to me, was every man, one word, capital E, and he paved the way for the rest of us schnooks. He was really, really sweet, and we loved him. He loved all the goings on at the lunch club and the trust office with Mani and the gang of us at the trust office. It was usually pretty rowdy and a lot of fun and interrupting. Mani is in the fray, everything. He loved all of that. And I don't know, Bal Natu. Here's one silly little story about Bal Natu and me, because I'm stupid, which is that once when I was staying at Meherazad, somebody had brought chocolate eclairs from Pune. So of course they would get counted out and divided up and shared with all the mandali, men and women, whoever was there. Except they were one short. And Goher said to me, okay, you bring this box of eclairs over to the men's side, bring it to whoever, I can't remember who I was supposed to deliver it to, but make sure you tell them, not for Bal Natu, because it's rich. It's got cream and it's got chocolate and all of this stuff. And if he eats it, he'll get sick. And she told me repeatedly, make sure when you bring it over, tell him that Bal Natu should not have one, because I don't want him getting sick. Okay, go here, all right, fine, yeah. She gives me the box. I go over and deliver it unto whoever it was. The next day, I went and I was talking to, Manu, and she's made a comment. Oh, yeah. Oh, those chocolate eclairs, something. Oh, yeah. They always forget Meherwan. I go, what do you mean they forget Meherwan? Yeah, Meherwan. There wasn't enough for Meherwan. And then I went, oh my God, I forgot to deliver the message about Bal Natu shouldn't get one of those chocolate eclairs. And of course, I don't refer to the little candy. I mean the dessert. How could I forget it? She told me 20 times and I completely forgot. And I was a little mad in my mind. This is all happening in my mind because believe me, I didn't confess to anyone that I had forgotten that. How could he eat it when he knows it'll give him a stomachache? But anyway, Baba blessed me at Bal Natu because he didn't get a stomachache. Goher never found out that he ate the chocolate eclair. Okay, that's my petty story for the day. He was so sweet. He made a special effort to have me come over and visit him when he was really not well in the record room, and we just sat there, and I don't think he was up for conversation, but he was just so sweet, and we love our Natuji. Jai Baba. And by the way, let me just add that there's this fantastic story that I heard on a recording, but I'm sure it's written out somewhere, in which Bal Natu plays a role, a very important role. So you have to look it up, and it's about Baba, Meher Baba, and what's the name of the guy? Sivananda, Glenn? Shivananda? Shivananda and Bal Natu's role in it. So that's your homework assignment. Go look for the story. Really, really, really good. Bal Natu. What a brave man. Okay, J-Pop.
Jay Babalaro. I'm sorry you won't tell that story about the bookcase, Glenn. Glenn, please.
It's nothing. It's just that. It's nothing.
All right. I'm not going to force the issue there.
Okay.
Alicia, am I saying that right?
Elisa.
I'll get it one time.
That's okay.
Jay Baba.
It's a common error, believe me. So, well, thank you. I mean, I'm just so enjoying all the stories. I really had a very, very special place in my heart for Balaji, and I can only say that I was somehow part of what he would call the tribe. He pulled me in, I think it was sort of the late 90s.
Elisa.
Yeah?
Oh, no, sorry. I got to mute myself.
Oh. Laurel. When there was this controversy going on about whether Robert, who would go out there, my husband at the time, Robert Dreyfus, would be always out at Meherazad treating the mandali and all of this, and it was always this ongoing controversy as to whether I was welcome to be there in the afternoons, because I didn't really quite have legitimacy to be there. And so there was some people, I won't name any names, but that had some problems with me being there. I should go back on the bus and all of this, but I would be invited to stay for lunch with Manu or whatever. And so this went on for a couple of years. And finally Bal, being Bal, said, you know, I would always spend time talking to Bal. And one time he said, I'm having a problem with my computer. Do you know anything about Macs? And I said, well, kind of, I do, you know, didn't really know that much, but I thought, yeah, I do. And he was having some problem with printing. And so he drew me in, and I spent one afternoon with him, and I was trying to figure it all out and get it right. And I have to say, he was a perfectionist, and I was always like stressed because I always wanted to try to get everything perfect for him. But that just led to, and then we would start talking about it. I would tell him that I had all these Baba dreams, and he made me promise that I would gather them all up so he could archive them. And, you know, and it was little by little, our relationship started to build. And then he just would give me work to do. And he'd say, you know, I want you to read this. And he would bring me into the record room, and we would start, you know, editing. And so then little by little he would give me work, so I had a reason to stay out there. And so this went on for years, and I was involved in working with the Intimate Conversations, and I worked with Fair and with Sherry Keller and Mark, and then every year I came, he would give me conversations to read or things to read and edit while I was staying at Meherazad. So I would go back and forth, and the whatever he would give me every year was so much a part of what I need. Like I always felt like, and we would have this thing, I would say, this is a CCC, Bal, because this is what you're giving me is like Baba talking to me. And that was just consistent across the board. It would happen every time. So and he was so appreciative of I never felt like I had really much to offer, but he made me feel that what I was doing was really important for him. And I always knew that it was Baba's gift to me through Bal. And so we had this really wonderful relationship that went on for years. And I remember, I was trying to remember, there was one, I think it was the book, The Star of Infinity, when I remember going there, and Bal was so excited that he had finished this book finally, and he gave me, and I think it was Sherry or maybe Fair, that we would go to the Samadhi with the book on Baba's birthday and bring it into the Samadhi. And it was such a wonderful thing to have been able to do, because he wasn't well enough, I think, to go that time. And we offered the book to Baba for Bal, and that was just a really special memory. So anyway, it was just, I just always felt like Bal gave me the greatest gift, which was some sense of legitimacy to have been out there at Meherazad, which I felt in my heart I belonged there. And so it was a great gift. So thank you. Thank you for letting me remember that and share that.
Thank you, Elisa. It's beautiful. Fair, I think you're next.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with so many of Bal's close friends. And yeah, and just as I'm listening to everyone, I'm actually just in awe of what Bal showed me for what it is to be a human. Like to think of this person who was so respectable, who highly educated in his native language, you know, with tremendous knowledge of poetry in both Marathi and also in Hindi and Urdu. I think probably a tremendous amount of memorization of you know, very advanced works and poems, and a school teacher. And in that role, I'm guessing always, you know, being used to being respected, at a Brahmin, and just the tremendous humility that a person of that, you know, respectable background, the humility that he would show. I think I met him earlier, but the first memory I have is when I was 10 and my mother and I were in the record room that everyone's describing, where it's basically just the room that he used for his work during the day that had these tremendous huge file cabinets, a couple of simple wooden chairs, and then one thin cot at the end of the room next to a window opening out onto a lovely tree and a swing hanging by a rope from the tree. And I was sitting, my mom and I, you know, were each sitting in different chairs. And as we were talking with him, he noticed that my legs were too short to touch the ground. You know, I was a child, and so I was sort of swinging my legs as we were talking. And he said, "Oh, your legs can't touch the ground, you know. I'm sorry, that chair is uncomfortable for you. Please go sit on the cot." So I did that, and then I had a chance to work with him for 9 months as a teenager when he was working on the Samadhi Star of Infinity, both that several people have mentioned. And I would get to work with him 6 days a week, every day except for Friday when no pilgrims were allowed at Meherazad. And again, just the tremendous humanity, you know, that the way that I am, I have 2 young children now, the way I am with children, the way I am with teenagers, I'm like, that's a child, that's a teenager, you know? But in working with him, I'm a human being. I'm not an 18-year-old American girl, like I'm a human being. Just an amazing, I don't know how to put that into words, you know, like to be a human being, to be regarded in that way. Every single day that I worked with him was a new day. I would come in the morning quite early, come in on a rickshaw, get in at about, I think 8:30 in the morning or 9. And he would have written out on little Post-it notes, little thoughts that he had. I don't know if it was early in the morning that he'd woken or before bed, going to bed, just little notes that, you know, his thoughts that he had. Many of which ended up in the book, The Samadhi Star of Infinity, but some of them not. And I remember one particular morning, usually I'd meet him in the record room, but this morning I came in earlier, so he was still in the room that Steve mentioned, where, you know, it's just a room that everybody gets to use when they come. I don't know where, you know, he wouldn't keep his personal belongings there. It was just 2, you know, beds and a desk and chair. So he was sitting at the desk, and I sat up on one of the beds, and he shared with me the thought that he had for that day. I have kept the Post-it note, so I don't have it with me though. I wish I knew the exact words, but basically what he had been thinking about is that if everything is God, then he's like, when I see, I am seeing through God's eyes. Like I am seeing, and that's God seeing. He put his hand on the table. He said, when I'm touching this, if this is God, God is touching me as I touch this table. And he went on like this. I guess that's the thing that I would just love to share this moment, you know, is like, it was that day. It was that new day, that morning, the beginning of the day. What are we going to do today? And I so appreciate that, because in getting to talk with other people at Meherazad and to speak to the, you know, the big people of the Mandali, so much of it in my experience was reminiscing about the past, and this is what happened, and Baba wanted this kind of toothpaste, and he did this and he did that, and the past. And at least in my relationship with Bal, it was what is happening today. And he would also talk about, he wants his daily vitamins. What are they? You know, we have vitamin A, vitamin C, etc. Well, his daily vitamins are B and A, B-A. That meant for him hearing people's stories of what is happening in their lives with Baba. And those were his daily vitamins. He needs his daily vitamins. Please give him his daily vitamins. So everyone who would come in, you know, he would get his daily vitamins from them, hearing their stories. So I guess just what I wanted to share quickly is what is happening today. You know, if I were here with Bal, I really think I would just get to share things I normally don't, you know, because I'm not so honest with most people. And I feel very natural to be honest with him. And I would say, Bal, I'm not really so much involved in the Baba community right now. I don't really do much, but what do you think? I don't know. I do have Baba's photos at my desk and in my office. I'm still doing the editing work I provide for my family, doing the editing work that you showed me how to do. And yes, last night I sang Baba's name to my children, but other than these photos and a few times singing Baba's name, my children don't get to have the experiences that I did of meeting you and going to Meherazad and all these things. And I wonder what you would suggest, you know, of how I can, what can I do, you know, to bring Baba more into my home. I'm about to move into a new home, and I would like to bring Baba more there. And I do remember how you said that you suggested actually to sit pretty much the same time every day and breathe in Baba's name with Ba and then Ba. And I complained, I said, but my breath is so long. And just imagine Bal Natu, I think, lost one lung in tuberculosis early on. Maybe I know Steve and Mark would know, and Amber. So his breath is very short. So it's very easy for him, ba, 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 ba. But I complained, you know, my breath is very long. It's ba, ba. And he said, he laughed. He thought that was funny. And he said, oh, that's even better then. You know, he was just like trying to like make light of it. But anyway, I did remember, sometimes I don't do it regularly, but sometimes I do remember, okay, I can just breathe in ba, ba. But Bal, I really would love to bring Baba more into my life. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I think you're muted, Ruth.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Farah. That was beautiful. Wonderful reminder for me today. Jai Baba. Betty Lohman, you want to go ahead?
Fair, I have to say, your mention of sticky notes, I was looking for, here's the book that Bal autographed for us when he takes over. It's sweet. As if I would ever want to take it out. I mean, I thought maybe he was being humble, and I know I feel the same way about writing in a book, but he said, well, it's Avatar Meher Baba, Ki Jai, and beloved Baba's love for the Lohmans. from the abode of the highest of the high, Meherazad, Bal, September 18, 1988. So I just had to laugh about the sticky notes. There's, my dog is going to share my space here. One little, Bao, I just remember in general his sweetness, as we all do. He was especially kind and good to my youngest kids, Shireen, who was 7, and Gary, who was 11. And they wanted to collect rocks from the hill, and I knew, you had to be very sparing about that. You had to leave. It was a problem for me because they were so excited, of course. And so I remember we were at the PC, and they had put their rocks out on the veranda, and they wanted to show Bal. So I said, Bal, I know they're not supposed to have so many, he said, don't worry about it. Just, he was so, I guess my thought from that was that, was to understand that, like the Mandalis, they're individuals. There's no party line. There's no Bal, that's how he responded to that situation, and that was fine for him in that time. So anyway, we did come home with too many rocks. So that's all. Just a memory of his sweetness. Thanks, Jai Baba.
Thank you, Betty. Jai Baba. Well, we still have about 10 minutes if there's anybody else that would like to double dip, or someone who hasn't shared. Karen, I don't know if you have something. Okay. Well, I'll give you another minute or so. There we go. There's some double dippers. Judy, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank Fair here for that share, because it brought back for me so much of what it was like to be with Bal, his presence, his, what you said about the presence was really significant in my experience of being with Bal. And the other thing that I've been thinking about sharing this if there was time, and probably folks like Steve and Mark would have much greater perspective than I from earlier years of being with Bal. But what I noticed over the years that I had a chance to work with Bal, which was, I guess, from 91 through the time that he passed in 03, and then doing some posthumous completion of a couple of books. But Bal, long before I was actually living and working at Meherazad, Bal was the go-to guy if you wanted to know anything about Meher Baba. He had been, he was born a Brahmin and highly educated and so knowledgeable. And the Mandali, it appeared to me, relied on him for a lot of the details of history and so forth. And over the years, that sort of intellectual knowledge seemed to become less and less important for Bal. And it seemed, I observed him becoming simpler and simpler. And the focus became less on anything other than Baba, Baba, Baba. And more he would emphasize the importance of saying Baba's name. And I actually noticed that in various of the mandali. Mansari had a saying, which probably several of you heard, take his name, win the game, major, minor, and final. And that's what Bal did at the end. And those last years, it was just focusing on his name. And there, when you mentioned, all I do is say Baba's name to my children at night, what an incredible gift you are giving to your children. The power, Bal would emphasize the power of Baba's name. And we don't know, I don't know, what I'm like a parrot. It's like, I take his name, I feel his presence. I don't have any vague appreciation of what that is. But I think for any of us individually or, to give to your children, that Bal would have cheered you saying, that's all I do for my kids is take his name. And so that's what prompted me to say what I'd been thinking about saying, and if there were time, that the power of Baba's name was one of the last focuses and messages that Bal gave me personally and seemed to be sharing with many, many others.
Thank you, Judy. Jai Baba. Karen, you put your hand down. Would you still like to share?
Okay. Am I muted now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, first of all, here's my beautiful picture of Bal Natu. I just wanted to share that. And I have two stories. In 1978, I was at Meherazad, and when I would go out to Meherazad, Bal Natu very sweetly gave me the opportunity to work with him on some editing. I am convinced I knew nothing about what I was doing, but how kind he was to include me and let me work on this. But what I remember the most, and I have remembered this throughout the years, is one day there was a trust meeting at the trust office. And as a trustee, Bal Natu went. So I guess that day there weren't as many mandali at Meherazad, because they were at the meeting. And it was a long meeting. He came back, it was the end of the day. And instead of showing any signs of exhaustion, Bal jumped out of the trust car and said, okay, let's get started on the book. And it was that passion, that enthusiasm that was so beautiful and so special. And I have just remembered that and continue to remember that in my life. The other thing, and I think Elisa or Fair, I can't remember who talked about bringing a manuscript to the Samadhi. But one day, Alan and I were at the Samadhi when Bal Natu came. And it was the most amazing experience. He brought with him a manuscript that he had just completed. He said he received this from Shariar, I believe. And we stood there in the Samadhi as he offered it to Baba. It gave me a feeling that I have not had at the Samadhi. It was so overpowering. The love was so strong. And the last thing I remember, Bal Natu said he didn't like the word tomb. It just had a sadness to it, and he liked Samadhi. But then one day he thought, tomb, to MB, to Meher Baba. So I just wanted to share those things and thank everybody for the wonderful stories. And if there's more, I'd love to hear it as well. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. That was beautiful. Thank you. Alan, do you have anything? Any memories? 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 Any
muted?
You're good.
Okay. I don't know if I'm good, but I'm muted. Well, there's a couple stories. One is modestly personal. I was sitting on the veranda, probably in front of room 3, minding my own business one day, not knowing it was Bal Natu's room until this very day. And he came up to me and he said, "Do you have any stories?" I told him the story of how my grandfather at about 80 became a Bible lover. And this story is recorded by Robin Vogel last November on her YouTube. It's an extraordinary story. It goes about 45 minutes. And he listened carefully, and at the end of it, he was so excited. He and I were the only ones out on the veranda at this point that he dragged me into Mondeley Hall saying, "Erich will love this story." He walked in the hall, whatever was happening, he says to Erich, "Alan's going to tell the story about his grandfather becoming a Bible lover at 80, which is fine by Erich because he didn't have to talk. And I proceeded to tell the story again for 45 minutes or so. All right. And they enjoyed it. They laughed immensely, and they really had a great time. Many years passed. I can't tell you how many, probably 10. And I'm sitting on the veranda, probably in front of room 3 again, minding my own business. And Bal Natu sidles up to me. And he says, "Alan." I said, "Hi, Bal." He said, "Could you tell the story again about your grandfather?" And I looked blank. I said, "What story?" He said, "You know the way your grandfather spoke to Baba and Baba spoke to him, and they were best friends. You remember that story?" I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Remember that? That's one of our favorite stories." So he dragged me again into, not dragged me, but he took me again into Mondeley Hall and announced to Erich and the crew that Alan was going to tell his story again about how his grandfather became a Bible lover. And he and Erich and whoever else was there enjoyed it immensely. Now I want to tell you, and that story is on YouTube, as I say. I did it last November. Now, a few years ago, Diggenbar Godeker was out here for reasons, and he wanted to have dinner with us. So we went to this Indian restaurant in a place called Lafayette, which is the next town up from where we live, and Keith Gunn joined us. So the 4 of us are there. Diggenbar didn't like the food very much, but that's a different issue. So the meal, he says to Karen and Keith and me, he said, "Do you know how Bal Natu became a Bible lover?" And we all looked blank and said, "No." He said, "Would you like to hear the story?" And we all said, "Yes." He said, "Well, here's the story." And he went on for 20 minutes telling more or less this story. Forgive me if the facts are mildly wrong, but this is the gist of it. He said, "Now, you know my father, who was Godeker, who was a Mondeley, Baba called him his school, was in charge of all the teachers in Maharashtra in a certain area. He had become, even though he was an untouchable, he'd become a very big person in the teaching field. And what his job was, he would go around from school to school, giving talks on what they're supposed to teach. But at the end, because he was so in love with Baba, that he would start talking about Baba in the hopes that one of the teachers or principals would be interested. And this wouldn't fly over here very well, but in India, I guess it flies pretty darn good. Well, anyway, he had this meeting in 1943 or 4. And after the meeting's over, this one man, young man, sidles up to him, and it's Bal Natu. And he says to Godeker, "Do you have any literature on Meher Baba?" And Godeker says, "Funny you should ask, I do." And he had some pamphlet. So he gave it to Bal Natu, and he says, "And now listen, read these pamphlets carefully, because Meher Baba is going to be giving darshan in this area," and I can't remember the town, somewhere in Maharashtra, in say 4 weeks or 5 weeks, not that much further down the road. So Bal Natu took the pamphlets home, and he was reading them. Now, what had happened in his life was, as has been mentioned, he came from a very Orthodox Brahmin family. And when his family started seeing him reading these pamphlets about a Zoroastrian master, They got all over him. And furthermore, even though he was a young man at this time, his father apparently had just passed away. So he was kind of the man of the family. So he had a lot of responsibility, even though he was just in his 20s. And he became attracted to what was said in the pamphlets. And so the next time Goddard came around in a couple of weeks, he went back to the meeting and asked Goddard, do you have any more pamphlets about Baba? And Goddard said to him, if you want to meet Baba's darshan, you have to at least become interested in it. He said, how interested are you in Baba now? He said, about a third. He said, well, take these books and when come back in a week and I'll give you more, but you have to be at least 50% interested. So Bal Natu went home, and despite his family's protestations, he continued to read the books and the literature he got. And he came back the next week, and now he was up to 67%. And it went like this for about 3 weeks until he became close enough to being interested in Baba that Goddard said to him, you can now come to the darshan, the savas, I mean, and meet Meher Baba. So in about 4 weeks, and I'm doing this quickly because we're running out of time, but the gist of the story after 20 minutes was that incrementally Bal Natu became more interested, 33%, 50%, 60%, 70%, whatever it was, that finally Goddard gave him the thumbs up that he could go to the savas. It was at that savas where he was 75% or whatever number he was going in, he became 100% coming out upon meeting Baba. So that's the story of how Bal Natu became a Baba guy. And the rest of the story you have told. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, beautiful. We'll have to go now and look at that Robin Vogel YouTube and see the whole story. That's just beautiful. Thank you, Alan. And I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to ask O'Hare. I didn't ask you, and I just wondered if you had something you might want to share for us quickly. Or Longley.
Not personal, no personal experiences with Bal as such, but I do remember him most vividly from our trips to Nagar and to Meherazad and Mehrabad mostly during Amartithi times. And his presence is still very vividly with me. So I do remember him. Very gentle, very unassuming, sweet soul. I do remember him very vividly. So, but unfortunately, no stories that I have. I was very young. I was just a child then, so very young.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Finally, Robin has her hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and let her speak. Robin?
Just real quick. I think I was one of those pilgrims that Judy mentioned who was just kind of shy and out of it in 1981. And Bal was like probably my favorite, most comfortable person to be with. And I remember in Mandalay Hall one afternoon with him, and he was trying to show me, even though it had been painted over so many times, the white, like kind of stucco wall, that there was an image of Baba that in the afternoon when the sun would shine a certain way, you could see him. And he was so patient with me. I looked and looked and looked, and then all of a sudden there it was. Of course, I tried to take a picture of it, but it didn't come out. But I'll just always remember him being so sweet to me and having me finally see that image of Baba on the wall very clearly. And I guess it's still there if people want to go try to look for it. Thanks, Jai Baba. Wonderful program.
Well, it's perfect to end on Baba's image for all of us. We can take a moment of silence and gratitude for Bal Natu.
Ruth, before you end up, I want to say one thing about that. His full name is Chintamani Vishnu Bal Natu.
Thank you.